Maxwell Taylor and the dozen or so remaining staff of the 101st Airborne Division's headquarters section huddle in a small patch of woods, listening to the sounds of battle coming from the south. A couple officers hold up a blanket blocking the light from Taylor's flashlight as he surveys a map of the area, along with Lieutenant Colonel Roy Allen, commander of the 1st Battalion, 401st Glider Infantry Regiment. Battalion is a generous word for Allen's command, an ad hoc formation of surviving infantrymen, artillerists, cooks, drivers, clerks, and other surviving 101st personnel, numbering in total less than 250 men. They are all that remain of the forces that defended LZ Hotel against 2nd SS Panzer Corps' assault in the afternoon. Their radio equipment lost in the drop, Taylor and Allen have up till now relied on runners to communicate with the other two battalions of the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, to which Allen's battalion has been attached for the operation. Taylor had also managed to establish a tenuous connection through runners to the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment, which he found out earlier in the day had managed to capture the village of Vagel and the bridges within. The last news Taylor got from the 327th was word that they had linked up with the advance elements of 32nd Guards Armored Brigade at a footbridge across the canal east of Zon. That was 5 hours ago. Now, SS troops are scouring the countryside, hunting for Taylor and the last few remaining survivors of the disaster at LZ Hotel. Taylor and Allen debate their next move. Should they make a break for Zon and the relative safety of the Garden forces they know have arrived there? Or make an 8-mile night march to Vagel to reinforce the 501st, which Taylor knows is under heavy pressure from other elements of 2nd SS Panzer Corps. He extinguishes the flashlight and emerges with Allen from under the blanket. He addresses the courier from the 501st standing nearby. "Can you guide us to Vagel?" "Yes, sir," comes the reply. The 401st packs up and prepares to move out east, across the canal, and to Vagel to carry on the fight. This is episode 2 of a series covering the irregular Wargame Club's refighting of Operation Market Garden. However, our scenario differs in a few ways from the historical conditions that Field Marshal Montgomery faced. I highly recommend you watch the last episode of this series, if you haven't already, to catch up to where this episode begins. Last we left off, it was the evening of September 18th, 1944, the second night of the operation. 30 Corps' initial three-pronged attack put them within sight of Eindhoven on D-Day, but their wide axis of advance prevented a true breakthrough. That meant on D+1 that 30 Corps had to fight a pitched battle against concentrated German forces for control of Eindhoven, which they only captured late in the day. This allowed advanced British forces to link up with American glider troops of the 101st Airborne Division at Zon, where they reported the disaster which befell Maxwell Taylor and the 401st, who Montgomery and Garden believed to be KIA or taken prisoner. Meanwhile, to the north, the 82nd Airborne Division at Arnhem made a strong initial push towards the bridge, capturing the Oosterbeek rail bridge in the process. However, German Kampfgruppe Strelitz, responsible for defending Arnhem, was able to launch strong counterattacks on D+1, which forced Gavin to consolidate his lines around the drop zones west of Oosterbeek. Just to the south in Nijmegen, the British 1st Airborne Division landed around the town, immediately capturing the railroad bridge over the Meuse at Mook, while the main body of troops moved into Nijmegen itself to capture the bridge over the wall. They found there the entire 5th Fallschirmjäger Division, which put up a stubborn resistance inside of Nijmegen, halting the British paratroopers. To the north, meanwhile, the Polish Brigade, attached to 1st Airborne, captured the northern landing of the wall bridges, but was unable to push across them, Late on the day on D+1, the 6th Fallschirmjäger Division attacked from Grave, and at this very moment is threatening to trap the balance of the British paratroopers inside of Nijmegen itself. And as we just now learned, despite what Montgomery and the rest of the Allies believe, Maxwell Taylor and his small group of soldiers are alive, and marching to Wegal to join the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment in its defense. The Allies have no idea that the Wegal Bridge is secure, and Garden is already over 24 hours behind schedule. The Germans seem to have a stranglehold on both Gavin and Uckert in Arnhem and Nijmegen respectively, and the 2nd SS Panzer Corps sits right across 30 Corps' route of advance between Zoen and Wegal. This despite Modul's heavy losses around Eindhoven yesterday. At this point, nobody is certain who holds the upper hand. But don't just take my word for it. Let's hear from the players themselves what they think of the current situation.
With landing as Arnhem and Nijmegen, the Allies were obviously trying to drive that far north. It seemed pretty obvious, especially when we started running into the airborne at St. Odin Road and around there. It became pretty obvious that they were trying to push past Eindhoven to get there. So it was a quick attempt to react to that, fortify 7th Army's front line, and figure out how we're going to deal with the paratroopers, because we were very forward deployed, and so we didn't have the background units to deal with all of the paratroopers. We had to hold the line until reinforcements could arrive.
Very early on in the battle, the Germans had adopted what appeared to be an extremely forward defense, and appeared to be pushing every single division they had available all the way to the south. So the initial plan, which would have had us reaching Vale by basically close of business on D-Day, that pretty much died. 30th Corps just could not seem for the life of it to get moving.
By the night of D+1, in a surprisingly effective river crossing, the 36th Grenadier Division and KG Hoffman had been completely destroyed. So, we are not in a great way, at least for my personal command on the night of D+1. But, looking at it, we kind of had some, I think, initial optimism, at least within the Army set, or really effectively a Corps, where what we saw was, okay, yeah, they made it. The opening attack really crushed us in many ways. Very surprisingly managed to crush us over a canal, which we didn't see coming. But the attacks near Eindhoven really broke down. We can do our math. We say, look, the 30 Corps and the Guards are being really chewed up. This secondary effort to the east, it's running now, but we might be able to keep it in check.
It was clear to me that the Germans, they really wanted to fight for every inch at this point. They didn't so much seem to care about the airborne drops. They seemed really intent on stopping the columns, and they pushed a lot of their forces forward to do that. Also, in particular, by the end of day 2, we realized that they were concentrating a ton of forces in the center against 30 Corps, so we started to urge the flanking corps, the 8th and 12th Corps, to push, and they've had a rather significant impact on the battle.
In the west, 15th Army continues its withdrawal south of Tilburg, but the pace is slowed as the British 12th Corps catches up to its lead elements. The Germans cannot afford to retreat much further, however, as they do not have much ground to give. 88th Corps arrives at its positions north of the canal, as does 1st SS Panzer Corps. Kampfgruppe Chill's divisions are around Tilburg, still moving to their new location around Oorschot. 50th Northumbrian does not press the attack against 88th Corps, as their axis of advance has been changed. 231st Brigade, and all the division's support elements consolidate at Zeelst to regroup. 151st Brigade is ordered to do so as well, but as they are out of fuel, is forced to send men on foot to retrieve jerry cans from the rear areas. They were only able to retrieve enough to give a single battalion enough fuel for a few hours, and the brigade remained stranded near Winterre. In one bright spot, however, some surviving crews of the 44th Battalion of the Royal Tank Regiment straggle into Division HQ during the night with a report of the disaster at Wonsel. They are fairly confident that a number of British tanks in Wonsel are merely abandoned and without fuel but not destroyed. The division may be able to recover some if recovery crews can get there in the morning. 69th Infantry Brigade is ordered to attack towards Best, but are forced to take the long road south and then north due to the swampy terrain southwest of Best. By the time they arrive at the main road, they engage 2nd Battalion, Kampfgruppe Chill, and Kampfgruppe Jungfurth's rear guard, and drive them towards Best. 2nd Battalion, 864 Festung Regiment, is not able to retreat with the rest of Kampfgruppe Jungfurth, and occupies the Wonsel Castle to make a final stand there. Meanwhile, as 69th Brigade is consolidating for a morning attack towards Best, the bulk of the retreating 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division runs into them. Oberst Walter, seeing the way north towards Zon was blocked, ordered a mass retreat west towards Best. Some units managed to slip around the north of 69th Brigade, but the bulk of the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division was killed or captured, including the division commander, who is now waiting to be questioned by British intelligence officers. Meanwhile, Kampfgruppe Jungfurth and the surviving elements of the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division retreat to Best and establish a defense there. 21st Provisional Division advances north from Eindhoven with the 8th Royal Scots, making it the whole way to Bocht, where it destroys what remains of the 9th Security Battalion, 9th SS Panzer Division. Guards Armored Division takes the night to resupply, planning a strong push to seize Zon in the morning. The 327th Glider Infantry Regiment reports they have lost all contact with Major General Taylor, and they place themselves under the command of Guards Armored Division for the time being. The 13th 18th Hussars is ordered to move north, past Helmond, but engages German infantry that have retaken the west bank of the canal to allow German pioneers to rewire the bridges there for demolition. The Hussars are halted for the time being. 129th Brigade advances towards Grienind, but, given the darkness of the night and the lack of extensive British pressure, most units still caught south of the canal manage to cross over to Hof. The Germans leave a small rearguard force south of the canal, while 7th Army and 2nd SS Panzer Corps sort out what units have survived. In Arles, a last gasp attack by the 130th Brigade manages to drive the Germans east across the canal. The Germans manage to blow that bridge, but the British seize another bridge leading north and advance to Beek. Leading scout elements make contact with the Germans around Hof, so Model knows his canal line has been breached before it is even formed. Montgomery's eastern attack in 12th Corps sector is finally launched and drives the Germans back a considerable distance, with lead elements of the 11th Armored Division pushed past Mile. Poor terrain to the east and west halts the advance there, but a considerable salient now exists in the German line. 86th Corps arrives in time to halt the British advance, but the Germans are now falling back along the entire front. In the morning, the line to the south of Tilburg has stabilized as 12th Corps does not have the resources to continue its assault. This is fortunate for the Germans, as the slow progress of Kampfgruppe Chill has left the tail of the column still barely north of the front lines. 88th Army Corps and 1st SS Panzer Corps consolidate their forces, with 1st SS Corps relocating to Best as General Brandenberger prepares to reorganize his multiple small corps and Kampfgruppe into fewer, more powerful formations. 50th Northumbrian Division remains in place, content to resupply and prepare for the day ahead. The Piron Recce Squadron observes the Germans destroy the rail bridge at Best, and is then driven off by enemy artillery fire. The last remnants of 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division and Kampfgruppe Jungfurth slip past the resting British and reach Best safely. Guards Armored Division and the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, with support from 21st Provisional Division, launch a general assault around Zon and Greugel. The Germans hold in Brugel, but the flak unit at Zon is forced to abandon their guns and the bridge. The guards race north and seize St. Odenrode, but are prevented from advancing further by artillery fire from SS Führen and the timely arrival of Schwebepanzer Company Hummel. For now, the British are holding the road open in order to push supply to St. Odenrode, but a concentrated German counterattack may leave these advanced elements of Guards Armored Division stranded. Montgomery, however, realizes he needs to throw caution to the wind if he has any hope of seizing Vale and reaching Nijmegen in time. In St. Odenrode, 10th SS Panzer Division HQ rapidly withdraws before the British arrive, temporarily losing contact with much of the division. A German counterattack on the Beek bridgehead by 107th Panzer Brigade and elements of the 9th SS Panzer Division result in heavy losses to both sides, but the British hold. Additional British forces arrive to strengthen the bridgehead. The Germans have lost their opportunity to push the enemy back, and have paid dearly for it. Kampfgruppe von Tettau and other small units reorganize around Hof, but an attempt to destroy the bridge when approached by B Company and D Company of the 2nd Household Cavalry Regiment fails. Pioneers immediately begin inspecting the charges along the bridges. The fighting around Helmond is minor, as the Germans destroy the 2 southern bridges and prepare to destroy the remaining 1 bridge across the river there. On Monty's eastern flank, the lines here also remain stable due to terrain and a lack of supply given to 8th Corps. Meanwhile, inside 43rd Wessex Division's HQ, a phone rings. A staff officer picks it up and is shocked at who he hears on the other end. The staff officer beckons Major General Sir Ivor Thomas to pick up the phone.
Hello? Who am I speaking with? This is General Maxwell Taylor of the 101st Airborne.
With this knowledge in mind, let's take a trip back to the beginning of the game and follow along with the 101st Airborne Division Commander Maxwell Taylor as he describes what his division has been up to, while Montgomery and the rest of the Allied team have thought that they were as good as dead.
So we were given the objective of landing into LZ Hell, which was the name that command gave for it. We didn't give it that name, and I probably would have preferred a nicer name than LZ Hell, but it wasn't inaccurate, it turns out. The 101st was given 3 objectives. There were 3 bridges that we needed to take so that we could connect the southern offensive across the border into the AO, so we could connect that southern offensive with the paratroopers up north who were landing around Nijmegen and Arnhem. So we were kind of the joint, or the first joint, so it was pretty crucial that we took the bridges that we needed to take, and there were 3 of them. Zahn, Vekel, and Beek or Beal. It's hard to tell. I think it's Beek, but regardless. The first turn that we land in 2 areas separated from each other by a canal, and the 2 elements that I had immediately under my command was the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment and the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment. And I had some support artillery and some engineers. I landed to the west of the canal with the gliders, and to the east I had the 501st. When we land, we immediately come under heavy flak, which is something that we had been warned about by command, but it was so intense we took casualties pretty much immediately, and I lost my radio, which connected me to command.
I had scheduled interdiction strikes between Zahn and Vale, because that's a major supply route, and I was doing things to try to make sure that the Germans couldn't operate. Well, I received a report from my squadrons that committed to that interdiction mission that they had attacked what they thought to be a panzer division and had driven it off the road into Drop Zone Hotel, which was the primary drop zone for those 2 regiments of the 101st, which we had renamed jokingly, turned out to not be jokingly, DZ Hell. I received that report basically the same time that 101st was dropping in on top of what I believed at that time to be a full panzer division.
So we landed, we had no contact with command for any kind of support. We lost contact with the other half of our element, which was across a canal. And then we were immediately attacked by mechanized infantry. So much so that it was such an intense amount of fighting that we used pretty much all of our artillery ammunition in close range direct fire against the mechanized infantry. But we managed to hold on to the LZ, I think, by the skin of our teeth, and I don't think that my other element was as heavily attacked. And it's hard to tell because all of the information that I received was so, sparse and indefined. I don't think the Germans ever knew that we had a second element on the eastern side of the canal, and that really helped us later on. I think they thought that we were all in the western portion of the landing zone. Oh, and I forgot to mention, as soon as we land, we heard a large explosion from the direction of the Beek or Beal bridge. So we knew that one of our 3 vital bridge links was gone, or we assumed so.
So we assumed on D-Day that 101st Airborne, the 501st and the 327th, and General Taylor and his staff were captured, dead, or captured and dead. And we assumed that for 2 days, because we had no communications whatsoever. We just assumed they were dead.
So we kind of had a tough choice. It seemed like we had enemies to our north coming from maybe to our northeast. It wasn't really clear. So I assumed we had a regiment to our northeast or northwest. I didn't know what we had to our south. I didn't know what we had pretty much anywhere in terms of enemy. But I knew that if we had two choices essentially. We could either hunker down in our LZ and try and hold out until we receive support, or we could try and accomplish our objectives, because my assumption was if it's going this badly for us, it might be going worse for the paratroopers up north. And those were the guys who wouldn't be receiving any support for days. I thought that I would be receiving, or I was told, I'd be receiving support within a day or two. So I decided to make an attack. We maneuvered 2 battalions of the 327th to the south towards Zon, and then I managed to make contact with the rest of my command by sending runners across drawbridges over the canals, and I informed them, and they were already moving towards Veghel. So we were able to take advantage of the fact that maybe the Germans thought that they had us contained and weren't expecting us to make counterattacks towards these bridges. And we sent attacks towards 2 of our objectives. So Zon was attacked by the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, and Veghel was attacked by the 501st.
Sometime on the second day of operations, I had a recon flight checking the area of Zon, because we were starting to slog our way up there, and I was trying to see what the Germans might have in reserve, and also what our situation looked like on the bridges. Had they been blown, maybe we could generate an opportunity to rush 30 Corps across the bridge at Zon. And I received back word there was heavy fighting around Zon, and it appeared an infantry attack was attacking Zon from the direction of DZL, to which we immediately began the legend of the 501st Space Marine Division, because there was no way that light infantry had jumped in on top of a Panzer division and A, survived, and B, was attacking it.
I wouldn't know about the exact conditions of those attacks, because I had remained in the LZ with 1 battalion of the 327th and essentially the engineers and our artillery, because I was still holding out hope that we would be resupplied on the second day, because that was scheduled, and I was hoping that the Germans would forget about us, but they didn't. And so on day 2, or D+1, we were attacked again in the LZ, and this time because we had sent so much of our forces away from the LZ, and I don't even know if they had been there, we would have been able to have held, but we were overwhelmed, and we lost the LZ. We lost our artillery support battalion, was pretty much wiped out. The engineers were pretty much wiped out, and I had a skeleton of a battalion of the 327th with me. I mean, I feel pretty lucky that my character, the commander of the 101st, wasn't also killed in the fighting, because basically we just got ran over by mechanized infantry and then hit in a forest. And that meant I once again lost contact with pretty much all of my elements again. So, I had another tough choice. The choice was to either go southwest to Zon, where I knew I had some forces fighting, and I think by this point I either knew that friendly forces were close by, or I could tell that they were close by the sounds of combat. So I could go that way and try and make contact with those elements, or I could go north across the canal, use the same drawbridges that we had been using to communicate with our forces attacking Veghel, and get there. I decided to go north because my understanding was if there are friendly forces closer to Zon, then I don't need to go there. Either that attack is successful or it's not, and my presence there isn't going to help it very much. But where I could be useful is in Veghel. because I didn't know at this point if we had taken it or not, and if it hadn't been taken, then something needed to be done to take it, because it looked like Zahn would fall or it wouldn't, and either the forces that had just attacked our LZ would reinforce that fighting in Zahn, or we had taken it and that's that. So we end up sneaking around the Germans. I think they forgot to kill the rest of us or didn't know that they were survivors, but we escape at night and slip up north, cross over the canal, and end up in Veghel, where we find that in fact we had captured it. Which was a nice surprise. And when we arrived there, we had fortified it and were preparing to hold the bridge. So the Germans, I think at this point, realized that we had done this and were generating a large-scale attack to retake the town, because it turned out that Veghel ended up being a pretty crucial bridge. I don't know the strategic implications of what it meant for us to take Veghel, but I know that it does mean that they would probably have to divert a certain amount of their troops to other bridges further to the northwest. So I think we kind of made them have to take the long way around. And they blew up the bridge at Biel on their own, so that's their problem. So we end up getting attacked, I think, on D+2 by the Germans, and I think we're outnumbered about 2-1, and we're being attacked from at least 3 directions. Veghel is kind of a nice position to hold because it has essentially 3 canals around it that form a little triangle, and I think that probably added to the difficulty of their attacks. But we were just paratroopers, and we had no support, and eventually we would run out of supply.
We had established that 327th Glider Infantry had made it to Zahn, was fighting their way to the bridge. Guards Armored was pushing for the bridge. We were going to seize that bridge, and great, we're going to rescue whatever's left of the 327th and seize the Zahn bridge, then we only have to worry about bridging the Moss Canal there at Vale. And General Ivor, Otto, receives a phone call from General Taylor, who is sitting at Vale and asking us what's taking so long.
We finally were able to make contact with some kind of element, because we were able to call the Brits who were in contact with us. So we finally are able to make contact with the 43rd Wessex through a Dutch phone line that we were graciously given by a local inhabitant of Veghel. And basically we tell them, like, hey, we need some kind of support or we're about to lose this bridge. They rushed up artillery to provide immediate artillery support for us, because we were getting hammered by German artillery, German tanks, German infantry, and that timing ended up being crucial, and it was very much something that they initiated and were able to do by pushing their artillery forward. And I know that behind the scenes, Montgomery ordered them to reach us with armor or something by as quickly as humanly possible.
Taylor's phone call to the 43rd Wessex couldn't have come at a better time, as General Modell's eyes are now firmly fixed on the stretch of highway between Zahn and Veghel. He intends to slow down the guards as much as possible while exerting maximum pressure on the 501st in Veghel, hopefully destroying the pocket before the Allies can reinforce the bridgehead. To accomplish this, 2nd SS Panzer Corps is tasked with holding up the Allied advance, while Modell vectors in the balance of 2 corps, totaling 4 divisions of German troops toward Veghel. Both sides are now committed to a major battle between the canals. The first waves of German attacks begin shortly before noon. Taylor and his men hold them off with minimal casualties. The paratroopers have had 24 hours to dig in and use the terrain in their defenses well. This, while 80th Army Corps, leading the attack, has had to cross an open field to approach the town. But the Germans have now crossed that gap, and the next assault will likely be more effective. At the same time, 43rd Wessex brings up artillery that can just barely reach the Americans. They may just make the difference, and allow the 101st Airborne to hold on long enough for the Guards to arrive. 5th Guards Armored Brigade destroys SS Fuhren artillery and drives towards Wegel, where they are halted by the reconnaissance troops of SS Brinkmann, supported by 10th SS Panzer Division's Flak Battery. They are just over 3 kilometers from relieving the Americans at Wegel. Meanwhile, much of the 32nd Guards Brigade arrives in St. Odenrode, with the divisional artillery and supply trains on the road stretching back the whole way to Eindhoven. Around Zaan, elements of 21st Provisional Division, 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, and the 32nd Guards Armored Brigade hold the road open, but the Germans do not attack. The Germans plan a coordinated attack on St. Odenrode from the west, north, and east. However, 10th SS Panzer Division's temporary loss of communication with its units and a timely British attack around Hoth result in the attack being made piecemeal. An attack by the 10th SS Panzer Division from the north and east is easily defeated, while an attack from the west by 1st SS Panzer Corps and Schwere Panzer Company Hummel retreats with heavy casualties. Kampfgruppe van der Heide intends to join the attack, but arrives too late and is in column to the southeast. 43rd Wessex's attack northwest of Beek is intended to hook south and pin the Germans against the canal. It does not quite succeed, but does prevent 107th Panzer Brigade from heading towards St. Odenrode. Some British units head north, but the poor terrain will make advancing and supply difficult. While the British are advancing, 363rd Volksgrenadier Division of 12th SS Corps attempts to cross the canal north of Beek, but is easily defeated. They begin lining the eastern bank in order to interdict British movement on the west bank. 50th Northumbrian Division attacks towards Best and seizes the road bridge. However, only one battalion is across, and Kampfgruppe Chill is now arriving in the area. The Germans will at least be able to contain the breach, and may be able to throw it back altogether. In 12th Corps sector to the west, the retreat of 15th Army finally reaches its intended defensive line south and southeast of Tilburg. 12th Corps advances but does not push. In 8th Corps sector to the east, the Germans withdraw into Helmond as the last bridge is destroyed. Neither side seems keen on fighting here. 8th Corps remains at a stalemate, which will likely continue. At Modul's headquarters, OKW inquires as to the rapid pace of 15th Army's withdrawal. Modul is advised that such a rapid retreat will limit the German ability to control the approaches to Antwerp and cannot be continued. In the evening, 80th Army Corps continues the attack on Wegel from the northeast and east, but is again rebuffed by the Screaming Eagles, albeit with minimal loss on both sides. Timely artillery support from the guns of the 43rd Wessex Division, firing at the extreme edge of their range, proves invaluable. A probe from the northwest by SS Infantry is easily driven off. Meanwhile, Guards Armored pushes hard from St. Odenrode towards Wegel, while 2nd SS Panzer Corps and the 107th Panzer Brigade are trying to evacuate the Hof pocket at the same time. Some German units manage to dash across the St. Odenrode-Wegel road, but Guards Armored's thrust pushes them aside late in the evening. 1st Battalion of the Coldstream Guards links up with the Americans in Wegel, but the tanks are out of fuel and low on ammunition. An attack north by Kampfgruppe van der Heide fails to sever the road, but the British line of communication to Wegel is quite tenuous, and units will need to be diverted to maintain control of the road from St. Odenrode to Wegel, as well as the road from Zaan to St. Odenrode itself. Around Hof, 43rd Wessex Division goes all in and captures or destroys the bulk of 107th Panzer Brigade, as well as some elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps. Only a weakened infantry battalion remains in the pocket. 43rd Wessex, however, spends the night refitting before the division is able to resume the attack. Near Best, Kampfgruppe Walter, reinforced with some battalions from Kampfgruppe Chill, reorganizes and forms a defense around the British bridgehead. This gives the British a slight opening which they use to push the rest of 69th Brigade across the canal. 50th Northumbrian Division likely cannot push any farther, but likewise the Germans will have a hard time dislodging the British. The flanking corps remain quiet as the British do not attack and the Germans continue to hold position. Montgomery and Horrocks can breathe a sigh of relief now that they've reached Wegel, however tenuous the connection. However, developments with the other airborne units to the north are not as encouraging. Let's backtrack to this morning and see what's been happening near Arnhem and Nijmegen. Near Arnhem, overnight Gavin orders 2 battalions of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment to attack north and attempt to clear Drop Zone Charlie, but the Germans fend them off and remain in control of the drop zone. 2nd Battalion 508th, while attempting to secure a corridor for the 2nd Battalion 401st to withdraw out of the pocket near Arnhem, destroys a probing grenadier unit and holds off another. Unknown to the enemy, 2nd Battalion of the 401st slips through the cordon and retreats past drop zone Iota. German artillery conducts a fire mission against the paratroopers east of Renkum, but shoots out and causes disorganization to the 184th Artillery Battalion before getting the ceasefire order. Kampfgruppe Strelitz is now largely reorganized, and with additional reinforcements just arrived, will be ready to push hard against the All-Americans in the morning. Gavin will be hard-pressed to maintain control of his drop zones, let alone retake Oosterbeek Bridge, even though it is lightly defended. In Rhenen, patrols from Kampfgruppe Strelitz HQ capture Jedburgh Team Daniel 2 and turn them over to the Gestapo. What information, if any, will they manage to extract from these commandos? The 5 British battalions in Nijmegen, realizing they are about to be surrounded, attempt a breakout through Supply Drop Zone King, 1st Parachute Field Squadron, covering DZ King, and the Glider Pilot Regiment farther south in the Deckerswald both hold off German attacks, but the breakout attempt is stopped cold. The Germans close the pocket and now have all of the 1st Parachute Brigade and 2 battalions of the 1st Air Landing Brigade surrounded. The 1st Airborne HQ position on Groesbeek Heights is not attacked as the Germans consolidate and reorganize in Groesbeek Village down below. It is likely only a matter of time before Uckert finds himself surrounded as well. He can only hope the Germans are forced to withdraw enough troops from the area to allow him to break through to his beleaguered troops in Nijmegen. Meanwhile, a supply line has been opened to 5th Fallschirmjäger Division in northern Nijmegen. It could easily be cut, if the British had the troops available to do so. Browning conducts a piecemeal attack on Grave and the bridge to the northeast, and fails at both. The Panzerjäger and Grave continue to hold while a battery of 88s on the far side of the Maas drives back the attack by 1st Battalion of the 502nd. Browning maneuvers the remainder of his troops south and east to protect against the attack he is certain is coming from that direction. There are actually no German plans to attack from that direction, but Browning's prudence is logical, given the sighting of reconnaissance units to the south. There is somewhat of a lull around Arnhem in the morning, as the 82nd Airborne reorganizes and Kampfgruppe Strelitz moves reinforcements from Ada. SS Schultz, 2nd Battalion SS Lippert, and the 184th Artillery Battalion attack Renkum and drive 3rd Battalion of the 504th out of the town. In the north, the Germans set up a thin screen to keep the Americans boxed in. Gavin sends his reconstituted recon platoon north to scout the road to Ada, where it runs into 3 German battalions headed east. There is a brief skirmish that halts the German column for now. In the south, 3rd Battalion, 1224 Grenadier, moves from Valberg towards Riet and learns the hard way that the Polish paratroopers there have had ample time to dig in. The German force disintegrates, and the survivors scatter. 2nd Fallschirm Corps is content to maintain its encirclement of the Red Devils in Nijmegen while shelling the Groesbeek Heights. British engineers at Supply Drop Zone King probe the enemy, but are driven back with loss. Corps Felt's Reconnaissance Battalion reports that Mook is held by, quote, enemy jeep-mounted infantry, but fails to spot the 6-pounder battery on the east side of the Maas. The valiant 6th Fallschirmjäger Panzerjäger is ordered to withdraw from Grave, but, as the Americans overlook the Niederasselt Bridge, is forced to evacuate using a swing ferry across the river, leaving heavy guns and equipment behind. In the afternoon, Kampfgruppe Strelitz continues to slowly tighten the encirclement of the Americans, while the paratroopers fight like demons to maintain their position. Minor German attacks on the west side of the perimeter are either rebuffed or gain little ground. A German attempt to sweep Supply Drop Zone Iota results in 2 shattered Grenadier battalions, allowing the American engineers to recover a small amount of ammunition. Kampfgruppe Strelitz is still a potent force, but may be underestimating the American strength. Now that Gavin has had time to reorganize his troops, he can likely hold out until morning. If the weather clears, he may be able to land supplies and reinforcements on Drop Zone Baker to the north, depending on if the Germans make a push in that area. Unfortunately for the 82nd Airborne, however, 30 Corps is dangerously behind schedule. Unless something in the south breaks open soon, it is doubtful Arnhem will be relieved in time. The paratroopers trapped in Nijmegen attempt to break out to the north, at the same time the Germans assault from the east and west. The end result is significant casualties on both sides in the east of the city, but the lines remain static. Uckert withdraws his glider pilot troops back to the HQ perimeter, while Meindl slowly shifts around units to the west of the Groesbeek Heights. British patrols observe enemy infantry moving around to the west. A half-hearted German attack on Mook from the north is easily handled, but the British do not have enough strength at the bridge to hold it if the Germans decide to make a serious attack. 1st Airborne may be able to hold out until 30 Corps arrives, if Garden hurries, but 2nd Fallschirm Corps is doing an excellent job of containing them. At Grave, the Germans detonate the Niederasselt Bridge, but the damage is not enough to destroy it. An attempt to rewire the bridge is stymied by American gunfire from across the Maas. Browning has his men reorganize and resupply, now that he has recovered all the supplies dropped nearby. Generalfeldmarschall Model receives a call from OKW. First, he is informed that the Gestapo interrogation of Jedburgh Team Daniel 2, captured earlier that day, has revealed a possible paratrooper landing at Rainen. He is reminded that the bridge there cannot be allowed to be captured. In the evening, the German 190th Infantry Division and a few other small units break off from Kampfgruppe Strelitz to form Kampfgruppe 190. The Germans and the Americans are content with minor skirmishing and the tightening of their lines. Arnhem is largely quiet, but will likely erupt in heavy fighting in the morning. Sporadic fighting occurs in the Nijmegen Cauldron, but without concerted effort, the Paras will survive for quite some time. The Germans will need to dig them out block by block. 1st Battalion Kampfgruppe Henke overruns the 1st Parachute Field Squadron, Royal Engineers, on Supply Drop Zone King, but otherwise Nijmegen is also quiet. German forces move around the west and east sides of Grosbeek Heights in preparation for a nighttime attack on 1st Airborne Division's HQ. The small Anglo-American force at Mook reports the enemy is still overlooking their position, but the Germans make no attempt to seize the bridge. Around Grave, German pioneers are still unable to rewire the bridge for demolition, but Lieutenant General Browning does not have enough troops to force the crossing. Field Marshal Montgomery, meanwhile, spent much of the last 6 hours convincing the RAF to fly missions, even in the poor weather, and his persistence won out over the objections of the air commanders. Only a few squadrons managed to find a suitable target, but those lucky airmen attack and destroy the remnants of 6th Fallschirmjäger Panzerjäger Battalion at Niederauselt, guarding the Grave Bridge, although a few aircraft are lost in the attack. So, at the end of D+2, let's zoom out to the strategic level and get a sense of the larger picture. The Germans continue to overestimate their ability to hold ground or retake it by a counterattack. This has led to quite heavy German losses, while 30 Corps remains largely intact, although low on fuel and in desperate need of a few hours to reorganize. It looks as if the Germans will continue to smash against Wegel, confident they can drive out an entire regiment of paratroopers before Guards Armored can fully relieve them. But with more and more British artillery moving within range, this is likely a pipe dream. Instead, the Germans would be wise to use their positions west of Zon and west and northwest of St. Odenrode to limit the British ability to move troops and supplies north between Zon and Wegel. This could be especially useful over the next 6 to 12 hours, as the road north from Eindhoven to Zon is crowded with supply trucks and units moving north. The British have not been effectively managing the flow of supplies and troops north through Zon, resulting in having a sizable amount of supply around St. Odenrode, but not enough units to hold and expand the breakthrough. If 30 Corps is able to reach Grave or Mook by late afternoon on 20 September, they may be able to claim somewhat of a victory, as German losses have been unacceptably high. But if both the 82nd and 1st Airborne Divisions are lost, not to mention Lieutenant General Browning and his staff, this would more than balance the German losses and render Operation Market Garden a complete disaster. If both sides take the night to rest and regroup, the outcome of the operation will likely be determined by the end of tomorrow. The Germans have the paratroopers around Arnhem and Nijmegen pinned down in defensive positions. Neither division has captured its assigned bridge. Taylor and the 501st are being supported on a shoestring line running back to Zon, with determined SS forces on both sides of the road determined to cut that link. Model holds a planning conference overnight, and determines the time for a decisive battle has come. He orders 7th Army to marshal as many forces as possible west and north of St. Odenrode. These troops will launch a concentric attack in the morning alongside the trapped troops of 9th SS Panzer Division to the east of the road in order to cut Hell's Highway and break out the trapped panzers. At the same time, Model orders the troops around Arnhem and Nijmegen to prepare attacks that will finally destroy the paratroopers there, who are by now holding on by a thread. Will 30 Corps be able to hold the road to Wegel open? Will Maxwell Taylor and the 101st successfully hold the bridges there? Can Garden make it across the canal? Will the Red Devils in Nijmegen be relieved? Will Gavin and the 82nd Airborne Division be simply left for dead in Arnhem? Find out in November, when the third part of this series will be released. Make sure to subscribe to the Irregular Wargame Club YouTube channel, so you don't miss it when it comes out.